Hey everybody, I am just adding this clip before you get into the main clip. It is a long video, 23 minutes, but it's full with a lot of good information and just kind of like my thoughts on breastfeeding and the shaming, the mom shaming, how much I hate it, and kind of just I talk about 5 things that could cause a mom to hate breastfeeding and just really, have a good talk with you guys and kind of like hopefully be able to interact through comments if you, leave some comments for me. But grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever and let's sit down and let's chat. Welcome everybody to today's video. Today we're going to talk about, as you can see from the title, why I hate breastfeeding. And I noticed that it is something that once you mention, if somebody mentions that they hate breastfeeding, that a lot of women come out of the woodwork and they start talking about how much they too hated breastfeeding. So I thought that we would take a minute and talk about 5 reasons why you might hate breastfeeding. And before I get into the discussion, this is not a video that is going to do any mom shaming. I am a breastfeeding educator and I'm here to help a mom with breastfeeding. If that means help a mom stop breastfeeding, then that's my job as well. My job is to help that mother with her breastfeeding experience or her breastfeeding situation. And I am somebody who believes in breastfeeding. I wanted to be a breastfeeding educator because I went through so many different situations and I understood that breastfeeding is not just cut and dry. It's not something that everybody can do and it's easy. Some people it does come easy and some people it does not. Some people love breastfeeding and some people hate it. Some people find breastfeeding so time consuming. Other people don't mind sitting down and to them it's not that big of a deal. A lot of times it's our situation, the type of situation that we find ourselves in is very different from another person's. We could be someone who is a stay-at-home mom. Maybe we have other children around, and so breastfeeding is very hard when you have other children, toddlers, older children, whatever it is. Or maybe you're a working mom, and the time it takes you to pump, and then when you're up at night breastfeeding, whatever, that could be difficult for that mom. So everybody's situation is different. You could be a stay-at-home mom and it goes great. You could be a working mom and it goes great. So we don't want to compare ourselves to another person that has similar situations because that doesn't mean anything. The makeup of us, the makeup of our baby, the situation that we find ourselves in and how we handle that situation is different from the person next to us. And we cannot judge or shame another mother for how she might handle her situation. So this video is not going to be about shaming. We're just going to talk about some reasons why you might hate it. And I'm going to say at the forefront, if you hate breastfeeding and you don't really want to hear what you can do to make breastfeeding better, or you just aren't comfortable with it, then stopping breastfeeding is not the end of the world. It's not something that you need to feel you failed at or that you're a bad mom. And at the same time, you don't want to shame other moms who are breastfeeding who maybe you feel are judging you, but yet they're not. So we have to be careful in both areas because as a breastfeeding mom, we have to be careful not to shame a mother who is not breastfeeding by maybe unintentionally talking about, oh, well, you could have tried this, or just being oblivious to what that mom is going through and never comparing yourself or saying, well, this is what I would do, or this is what I did. And then a mother who chooses not to breastfeed due to whatever feelings that she has, she wouldn't want to just assume that that mother who's breastfeeding is judging her for not breastfeeding. And I can say this because I breastfed and I bottle fed. And I remember feeling judged when I would sit in a room and these moms were breastfeeding, I would pull out a bottle. But it wasn't because any of them were saying anything. It wasn't because they were looking at me. It was because it was how I felt. I felt that somehow I had failed my baby because I should have been able to do what supposedly is natural. That's what I'm told. And I'm around people who could do it, and they did it without any problems. And here I am, and I'm struggling. So sometimes our own insecurities, and it's not our fault either. Like, we're grown, we are, sometimes we grow up in a situation or in an environment where, breastfeeding is expected or bottle feeding is expected. And so we just have to be on both sides, be practical and reasonable, and just remembering that no matter what we choose to do, it's our choice, and we have to kind of like put blinders on to what other people think or say, and it will really help us to deal with, the situation when we're put into any kind of situation that makes us uncomfortable, whether it be a breastfeeding mom or whatever the case is. So if we kind of understand the reasons that we're going to stop breastfeeding, or the reasons we don't like breastfeeding, if it's not something we can fix, if it's not something that we want to fix, that's okay. I said recently, why does there have to be a choice between breast is best and fed is best? Why do we have to have this separation of, well, this is better, but really what's better is just feeding? Like, I don't know why we have to have this separation, because to me, it isn't breast is best, it isn't fed is best, it's what is best for you and your baby. That's what's best. So, we're not looking at what we're giving our baby. We're looking at what is the best situation or the best way that we can feed our child in the situation we are in, ourselves. And not necessarily having to, just because we can't breastfeed doesn't mean we have to veer towards fed is best. Because yes, that's true. Fed is best. But that's what breastfeeding moms feel the same as well. Feeding is the best thing. We're talking about breast milk being healthy for, the healthiest food for the baby, but we're not talking about breastfeeding being the only way to feed your baby and the only best way to feed your baby. There are people out there that have that mentality, and I don't deny it. There are breastfeeding advocates, teachers, consultants, counselors who do have that mentality. But I just wish that we could get away from that. Why we have to be divided. We shouldn't knock breastfeeding, nor should we knock formula feeding. And I think that's my frustration is seeing us knock one or the other. Like, if you don't like formula feeding and you think it's horrible, keep that to yourself. And if you just felt breastfeeding didn't work for you, that's okay. That's okay to feel that way. But we don't have to necessarily feel that we're being judged by the other half and then start to get into this mentality where we're advocating something just because it was what was best for us. And again, I'm not trying to come off as supportive of one or the other, because I don't believe we need to be. I don't believe we need to be supportive of one or the other. Yes, I'm an advocator, but mainly because I am an educator. So I educate about breastfeeding, and I help moms who, are trying to breastfeed and what it is they want to do to succeed. But if I have a breastfeeding mom who doesn't want to breastfeed anymore, then I'm going to help her, transition to formula feeding. If I have a mom who's formula feeding and wants to go back to breastfeeding, I'm going to help her transition. If I have a mom who is struggling, she wants to breastfeed, but she's just having so many issues, whatever they might be, I'm going to help her come to a decision that's best for her. And I'm going to support her decision, and I'm not going to advocate one or the other. I'm going to advocate her rights to choose what she wants to do and get away from this whole breast is best or fed is best. Just what's best for you is best. Like, can't we just say that? What's best for you is best. That's all that's important. Yes, feeding our baby is the best, but however we feed our baby, it doesn't matter. And so if breastfeeding is best for you, if formula feeding is best for you, that's all that matters. we don't need to choose between the two of which is best, or trying to shame one another. And that's what I feel like this has become. Breast is best, fed is best has become like this shaming one another. And I have a problem with it, and it bothers me. So I wanted to make this video. And I'm already 10 minutes in, and I haven't even talked about the couple of things that I want to talk about. But hopefully these won't take long, because I'm not going to be long-winded about some of these things. But I do have other videos that talk about, I believe, each one of these things. I don't know if number 4 is, I don't know that I have a video on that. But each one of these topics that I'm going to talk about, I do talk about in other videos. So definitely check out my videos and, see what, might help you in your situation. And like I said, if you really are not happy with breastfeeding and nothing that I talk about today makes you feel like, okay, this is something that I want to continue doing, then it's okay to stop. It's okay to stop breastfeeding and begin formula feeding. There's nothing wrong with it. There's also nothing wrong with doing both. There's nothing wrong with breastfeeding and supplementing. And I'm going to kind of get into that. Number 1, one of the biggest reasons a mom might hate breastfeeding is this overwhelming feeling or depression she gets when she begins to breastfeed. Sometimes it might just last 30 seconds to a minute in, and then it kind of wears off. Usually sometimes it can last a couple minutes, but usually it doesn't last the whole entire feeding. But it can, because if you have multiple letdowns, what happens is it's called dysphoric milk ejection reflex. And I do have a video that talks about it. And it's basically when your dopamine drops during letdowns. So if you have multiple letdowns when you're feeding, then you're going to feel that overwhelming sadness. It can bring you to tears. Some women, it even makes them suicidal. So this is definitely a condition that you should talk with your doctor about. There is a medication that you can take if it's very, very severe, like being suicidal. And it's also okay to stop breastfeeding if you feel like this is just not, I can't do this. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But if you're experiencing this and you still want to breastfeed, you just find that you're hating it, even though you want to do it, talk with your doctor. Talk with the people that, your loved ones around you. But your doctor, they're aware of this condition, and they're there to help you and give you whatever it is you need to continue breastfeeding or to stop breastfeeding, whatever, your choice is. So typically when you begin to breastfeed, oxytocin is released. And this is called the happy hormone because it makes you relaxed. It can make you feel tired almost, but it kind of just gives you this feeling of a euphoria. You're just kind of really relaxed and happy, and you just kind of look at your baby and you just feel happy. That's when oxytocin is released. But if you have the opposite, which is the dysphoric milk ejection reflex, that's dopamine, and that drops. Instead of oxytocin being released in your body, the dopamine in your body drops, and this causes and you'll find that you're only depressed when you feed. You're not depressed afterwards. You're not depressed in between. It's just when you feed, and that's called dysphoric milk ejection reflex. And like I said, you can look up that information. I will put this in the description as well. So that's number 1. That could be a reason why you hate breastfeeding. Number 2 could be pain. If you're experiencing extreme pain, nipple soreness, bleeding, cracking, whatever, this can also be a cause of hating breastfeeding. I mean, who would love something that's causing them such extreme pain? And even though you might really want to breastfeed, you might hate it because it's just so painful. And I know because I did experience that with one of my children, and it was very, very painful. The desire to breastfeed was stronger than the feeling of the pain and hating that. But I dreaded the next feed, but it wasn't like I hated breastfeeding, I just dreaded it. So sometimes you have to kind of figure out, do I dread it or do I hate it because of this? So there are some things you can do for pain. If you have cracked, sore, bleeding nipples, you can take a breastfeeding break. You can do some pumping. You can use nipple shields to protect that area while, you're still putting the baby to the breast, without it being painful. There's, ointments you can put on. There are different things that you can do. But again, you have that choice. With this pain, do I want to continue breastfeeding or do I just want to stop? And it's okay. It's okay to make that decision, whichever you decide. There is always the supplemental, just doing a little bit of breastfeeding and doing a little bit of bottle feeding. Again, there's always choices. You always have a choice of what's best for you. Not anybody else, but what's best for you. Number 3 is expectation versus reality. And I do have a video on this as well. Expectation versus reality, what we expect breastfeeding to be like, and then what it really is like. And sometimes our expectation is because of what we see or hear. We could be around somebody who their breastfeeding experience is excellent and just went so well. And then because, we are expecting that ours is going to be the same. And then we realize when it happens and it's not, we think, it makes us begin to hate it, to feel like there's something that we're failing in some way. Sometimes, the person that says that the breastfeeding is so great just fails to mention some of the hard parts of it. It's not that they don't experience the hard parts, but they just fail to mention what those are. Being excessively tired. It takes time. It's like riding a bike. You don't just get on a bike and ride. It takes practice, and you fall a few times and you scrape your knee and there's a little bit of pain, but eventually it gets better and better. You go through ups and downs. There are periods of the breastfeeding that it's great, and then you might go through periods where it's not so great. Sometimes it's our own confidence level as well. I hear some moms who will talk about their baby's going through this crying stage, like, okay, they're crying all the time and I have to figure out why they're crying. And women that are confident in their milk supply never even question whether or not they're getting enough to eat. But women who aren't as confident in themselves, they feel like they're a failure in some way. That's the first thing they think of, is that I'm not able to feed my baby the way that another person is. So what I notice is the baby will have the exact same symptoms, but because mom is either confident or not confident, it can affect your feelings about breastfeeding. So you can't compare yourself one to the other. You just can't. Again, you make that decision as to what your reality is. What is your situation? If you have multiple children or multiple babies, maybe you just have twins or triplets or whatever, and you're trying to breastfeed all of them, that might be a bigger than what you can handle. Like, you're expecting more of yourself than what is possible. And it's possible, but maybe not for you. Maybe it's just not best for your situation. And going ahead and, like, even if you're just giving 1 bottle a day to each kid, that's 1 bottle of breast milk, and that's good enough for you. That's fine. Like, you've got to find what will make you not feel so negative about breastfeeding. If quitting breastfeeding makes you not negative, then great. Stop breastfeeding. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you feel like, okay, well, if I could do this, I would feel better about it, then do that. There's nobody stopping you. Nobody should make you feel bad. And this is where I used to say to moms, just don't tell people what you do. Keep things to yourself, because it's not anybody else's business, and you don't need all of their opinions. So that's something that I wanted to mention. That's number 3. Number 4 is deep-seated emotional trauma. Sometimes we've been through things. It could be some type of physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, whatever. And this can affect how we feel about breastfeeding. And so sometimes in that case, again, you have to decide, do I want to continue breastfeeding, and what can I do to help myself not hate it as much? Can I partially breastfeed? Can I just breastfeed once a day? Can I, offer a bottle a couple times a day and have someone else feed? Or just finding what works for you to help you not hate it so much. And if there is nothing, the best thing for you is to stop breastfeeding, then that's okay. You can stop breastfeeding. That's fine. It is totally fine to stop breastfeeding. And I wish I could get that message out to moms. It's not, don't judge yourself and don't feel like you failed if you have to stop breastfeeding. You're doing what's best for you. And that's what is best, is what's best for you. Number 5, I've experienced the pain, the expectation, and I've experienced the pumping. If you are exclusively pumping or doing a lot of pumping, this can make you hate breastfeeding, because pumping, it's very hard to release oxytocin, which is the happy hormone. I do have a video that talks about some tips on making pumping a little bit easier. It's frustrating. It's not your baby. It's a machine. And so it can be very frustrating. I love breastfeeding, but I hated pumping. It's not the same. And the way you have to look at it is, I'm doing this for my baby, but sometimes that's just not enough. Sometimes it's just not enough. So if you're exclusively pumping and you hate it, and maybe you get plenty of milk out, or maybe you don't, but you just hate it, then it's okay to stop. It's okay to make it so that you don't hate it. So say instead of exclusively pumping, you just pump a couple times a day and give them a couple breast milk bottles a day. Because you're like, okay, right now I'm pumping 8 times a day or 10 times a day. But if I go down to just pumping like 3 times a day or 2 times or even 4 times, I would be happy. Figure out what would make you happy. And if stopping breastfeeding will make you happy, then do it. Because that's what's most important. So those are my 5 reasons why you may hate breastfeeding. You might have more than that, but I feel like most of them will fall under these categories of, expectation versus reality, pain, some type of emotional issues with it, pumping, this dysphoric milk ejection reflex, all of those, something, if it's not listed, then it can fall under those. Those are like main topics. So I really wanted to put this video out. I recently watched a video on why dieting doesn't work, and I loved it. And I felt like, we need more videos where we talk about things that aren't talked about. And hating to breastfeed, it's not talked about except in a negative way. And when you talk about it in a negative way, instead of bringing awareness to it, and then also allowing a mom to realize that it's okay to hate it. And if you hate it, if there's a way you can fix it, fix it. If the best way to fix it for you is to stop breastfeeding, then stop breastfeeding. That's just that simple. And I hope that this video helps. I hope that I don't cause any uproar. But honestly, for other breastfeeding advocates, I don't care if it would make them mad, because I believe that we have to be, in order to be the best educators and the best helpers and supporters of breastfeeding, we have to recognize that it's not for everybody and not every situation merits it. And it's just like people who have this tunnel vision and they only can see one way of, eating or whatever. Like, it's just, there is. So my point of this video is to bring awareness to it. And I would really love to see the end to this breast is best or fed is best, and just be what's best for you is best. Just that. What's best for you is best. And that's all. No more shaming, no more separating the two. Just what's best for you is best. And that's what I'm going to leave this video on. I'm at 23 minutes already. Hopefully you've lasted through the whole video. If you have, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can be notified when I put out new videos. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I will put information in the description for you. I will probably try to edit this, and if I can get it a little bit less, I definitely will. But I really wanted to touch on all of these points. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.